Right, I'm Kate Lee, and I'm here with Andy Frawley, who's the CEO of V12 Data, and Bob Weiler, who's the managing founder of Brimstone Consulting. The past several months have been wrought with change, disruption, and uncertainty. And as we look forward, uncertainty remains. We're unable to predict the coming year. And more than ever, organizations need to be highly adaptive and they need to be resilient. So what does this mean for strategy? Our work focuses on developing Agile Strategy, a strategy that equips leaders and organizations with the ability to excel at change and to gain a survivability edge over their competitors. So Bob, can you tell me a little bit more about what Agile Strategy is and what it means?
Well, thanks, Kate, and nice to be here. Particularly nice to be here with Andy. we have done a number of engagements with Andy, both at Epsilon and V12, and I think in terms of agility, both times we've been able to do that with Andy and with other organizations. I think first it starts with really looking at your market realities. And of course, in this disruptive time, what a great place to go back and kind of quickly assess. So where are your customers now? What do they need? What are they going to be looking for? When do they need it by? And that really is the backbone of a good strategy. And then understanding certainly your competitors and where they're going to attack you or where you're going to be vulnerable, understanding the macroeconomics you're in, and sometimes underlooked is your suppliers or your vendors. And when we say agile, we mean very quickly using your organization and then quickly getting that back to your executive team to validate that. And once you understand the kind of competitive forces, the customer forces, all those external forces you do not control, and you make some assumptions about them, quickly you can begin to see the opportunities. And I think, as everybody knows, in disruptive times, there are tremendous opportunities, and you have to move quickly to get to those opportunities. So that's what we mean when we talk about agile and we talk about fast. And Andy, in particular, at a very large company at Epsilon, Andy drove that pretty quickly. And then most lately at V12, I think we went through that first part of that strategy, Andy, and boy, if we didn't go through it in weeks, maybe it was 4 weeks. Yeah, max. So, Andy, I'll let you talk a little bit about it, but it was the speed and also how quickly we got information, not only from inside the organization, but outside the organization. And then quickly, Andy began to see, as the entire executive team saw the opportunities. I think that's a fair comment, Andy. I'll let you maybe talk about it.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. So I've been CEO of V12 for about 18 months or so now, maybe a little bit more. And when I got involved, the company, it was the merger of three companies that had been put together by a financial sponsor. And there were some integration challenges, as there are in almost every case. And so we wanted to sort of quickly hit the ground running and accomplish a couple of different things. We wanted to look for some efficiencies in the business, as is often the case. But more importantly, we were sort of relooking at our product strategy and our go-to-market strategy. And so the powerful thing about Brimstone's methodology is a couple of very unique features. One is, as Bob said, it's agile, so it's designed to both be executed quickly and then have the strategies be executed quickly on the back of that, and has a whole framework for implementation. But second, it allows the executive team to sort of engage with associates through the whole organization, and that's powerful both from a question to figure out what the strategy is, but even more importantly, it's powerful in terms of communicating the strategy. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges in times like we're in right now is your strategy is going to evolve, things are going to change, and how you communicate that through the full organization, so every associate at a minimum understands what's going on and hopefully feels like they had a voice in what's going on.
Right. And I think the part, Andy, that was interesting is that we ran a couple of cycles of that. So, quickly within few days of that first meeting, your executive team was in front of the associates asking kind of, so what are you hearing from customers, or what are customers looking for? And that quickly cycled back up for another round and then back down again, so that the organization actually had an opportunity in that impending time between from one engagement asking them to the next, where they were able to then go out and get even more information. And it just seemed like it built on each other, and that seemed to be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, no, it's we all like to feel like we're included in the process, and the reality is, in a lot of businesses, the people who are on the front line, the ones that are talking to clients, talking to suppliers, competing for new business, are the ones that have the most current information. And so, using the tools to sort of bubble that information up into the strategic planning process, it's also the most current information you're going to get. It's going to be more current than what you'd get from some third party sources or external party. And so, this process really leverages the power of the organization. You can supplement it with external, information or content if need be. But in the probably 10 times we've done this together, Bob, we've usually found the best source of market realities comes right from the frontline people.
The other part that, in terms of Agile, Kate, that Andy and I saw was that quickly, if it wasn't on the first meeting, it was certainly on the second, that we do this part about strategy to execution, as you know, and quickly there seemed to be some real opportunities to move quickly on. And Andy, I think you made some decisions about some opportunities based on the strategy really quickly to go out and test, because it just looked like there were some opportunities, again, bubbling up from the organization, because we were getting it from the front lines, and Andy could begin to see, there are decisions to make here, investments to be made, also savings to be made. I think that's fair, Andy.
Yeah, well, we very quickly identified about 10% of our cost structure that could be changed, eliminated. And it was mostly not really the people. Who were, other things that were going on, inefficiencies, that many of which sort of came from the merger of three companies together. And that we started identifying that in the first, several weeks and executing on it over, a period of time. And then, the other big challenge that V12 had at the time was we were selling almost exclusively through partners. What we, found when we sort of looked at the market realities is that if we wanted to really expand the aperture in terms of our market opportunity, we had to start selling direct to brands. And that was a big change that required, several iterations to sort of be fully implemented, which it is now. But we created sort of a testing framework, a learn and test framework, sort of, again, as part of this Agile strategy process. And we go out, we ran some experiments, we get some learnings. We, decided that we thought it would work. We built a small team. Now we're actually, it's worked so well that even in the COVID environment, we're actually out hiring, building our sales team out. We're going to double it over the next month or so. So, that ability not just to set the strategy, but to implement it with sort of a test and learn framework, I think is a really important part of being agile.
So when you think about, where companies are right now, I mean, we're several months into the COVID-19 pandemic. You people hopefully already have some sort of strategy in place to move their organization forward. But as we talked about, there is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of change that will be happening, a lot of things that we cannot predict going forward. So how can you see an organization, a leader, using this strategy to plan, whether it's the next 30 days or looking out further?
Yeah, so, I mean, in this environment, we're looking at our market realities every month. I mean, it's changing so fast that we feel like we have to step back and say, what's different from 4 weeks ago. We've built that into the regular cadence of our sort of management process at the company. It's not a special project or something like that. It's just something we are doing constantly. And then again, one of the sort of artifacts of the Brimstone process is a document that lays out, the big initiatives, but then short-term and long-term, activities, each of which has a sort of metric that tells you when, if it's actually done yet or not. And so, we're constantly sort of adjusting what those strategies should be. And in our case, we were really fortunate that one of the things that came out of the original work we did with Bob's team was we had built a big portfolio of new product coming down the line, a lot of which was very focused around helping brick and mortar companies enhance their digital business. And so obviously when everybody has to enhance their digital business now, we actually had 3 products that were, on the shelf or near on the shelf that we sort of rolled out right in the middle of COVID and having great uptick on all of them.
That's great. Bob, what about you from?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, Andy said it well, everybody right now should be going back to their market realities. If nothing else, as Andy, as the author of Ignite, knows, say, look, you have to go talk to your customer. You have to find out where they are. What are they worried about? What are their concerns about? What are they looking at? Because if they're doing the same thing, they're going to begin to see that they have opportunities. As Andy just said, here's digital space that people may not have been investing in, and now they are, and they need help, and they need to know where to go. There's also a part of strategy which a lot of people talk about, meaning that many of the problems you had going into a disruptive period like this, let alone a global pandemic, many of those you're going to have coming out of it. Not all. They may look a little bit different. They may be shaped a little bit differently. But besides how fast the space is changing and your industry and your market, you also know that organizational issues still may be there. You may not be structured right, as you heard, Andy, and I think everybody should be looking at constantly how to reorganize to either be efficient or serve your customers more effectively. So besides looking out at new opportunities and looking at the market, there's also making sure you take a look at those critical issues that you had or those strategies coming in very explicitly, and using the market realities to basically say, no, these things are dead and gone, or let's drop them, or not now, but when we get back to it, operational efficiencies are going to be important. As building a high performance organization is going to be even more important. And now when we come back from 90 days, 120 days. Some organizations I've heard are coming back till January 1st. Now they can, because that's how they operate, and they're doing well in this environment. But when they decide to come back to their office space, or they bring their organization back together, they're going to need to still deal with some of those organizational issues. And I don't know, Andy, what your organization can operate distributed mostly. But I'm sure you've got recovery plans thinking about when you bring the organization back together.
Yeah, it's I was just on a senior team meeting this morning talking about that. Yeah, we're lucky that we flipped to work from home over about a 24-hour period and have had no disruption at all. So that's obviously a luxury that not every business has. But I think it's an interesting question when you have multiple locations in different states with different situations going on. How we start to bring the teams back together. I think it takes thoughtful planning. I mean, the issue we had today is we had people coming into work when they weren't supposed to, and bringing their children with them. We're actually telling people to stay out of the office a little bit longer. But I think the communication, team communication through this time has also been, I think, very different. I mean, we've ramped our sort of communication cadence up to, probably every 10 days we're doing an all hands call. We're talking about just general updates, but we're also talking about general business updates, but we're also talking about, the coronavirus. We're talking about some of the social justice stuff, and just sort of keeping the team very engaged when, it's hard if you sit in your office for 8 hours and do, 10 Zoom calls a day. That's by yourself. That's a tough environment.
Right. Kate, I wanted to go back to the question about this Agile and how important it is. And I think, Andy, you represent this well. we've all heard the saying, perfection's the enemy of greatness. And I think many people get into strategy and they're trying to make it perfect when in fact it should be fast, flexible, and time competitive. And, quickly taking that information, as Andy was saying, from the front lines of the people who are constantly touching the customer or constantly looking at the competitor or dealing with the competitor, and translating that into the opportunities and making quick decisions around it, knowing that if you get that cycle going, just as you heard Andy right now doing it every 30 days, great for you, Andy. And that not only gets a muscle memory in an organization of constantly looking and constantly talking to your customer or your client, then you begin to see the opportunities, especially if you're pulling that in across the organization, like Andy, I'm sure you're doing. And when you can get out of that, let's not make it perfect, but let's move quickly and find opportunities and react to those opportunities. And you also can find, and I'm sure, Andy, you've got stories where you've made decisions and you think they were brilliant and you go, ooh, maybe that's not working. But if you're doing that every 30 days, you can stop and quickly move on to the next opportunity because somebody's sitting there saying, well, guess what I just saw. So I think that may be a fair comment, but what do you think, Andy? Can you?
Yeah, well, I think if anything, if we've learned anything in this period, is that a beautifully done 2-year strategic document that sort of sits on the shelf and maybe gets revisited once a year is a completely obsolete concept now. So, and and again, we're fortunate at V12 because we use agile methodologies across our whole business, and so what we try to do from a strategy standpoint is use some portfolio theory around having a set of strategies that we would like to test. And, some of them might be low risk, low reward. Some of them might be high risk, high reward. But, everything has, success criteria that is articulated, sort of part of the brief. And, we fail fast. If we try something and it doesn't work, we stop. I mean, one of our go-to-market strategies, direct to brand this year was retail. We stopped and redirected those resources, to other places. So, test and learn is really, in my mind, and in any business environment, but particularly one is sort of complex and where you don't have nearly as much control as we probably would like, is really the only way to push forward.
I think the other thing that Andy, we try to do in this agile methodology, but Andy really portrays it, is at the same time that we're working the strategy part, there's also a big part of Andy that of the transformation of the business, stopping some things, moving to other places. And I not only mean that on the product side, but as much on the organization side. And I think one of the briefs that Andy has given us and we believe in and do is also develop talent, leadership talent. And quickly you begin to see people both at the executive level who can play at a much higher level and can get more responsibility. And I think the same is true, Andy, down farther in the organization where you see real talent coming up. So in that concept of agile, while it's not only quickly, fast, flexible, in a time competitive manner, moving the strategy to execution. In other words, Monday morning, what do we do right away? It's also moving the business, transforming the business, of which Andy holds the organization accountable, and also developing talent. I think those are, again, fair comments, Andy, but.
Yeah, so again, one of the really interesting aspects of Bob's process is it has sort of a track of talent evaluation, talent development, and really focuses on identifying sort of the next tier of talent in the organization, the people who are very strong, have the capacity and the aptitude to take on more responsibility, to solve problems. And my experience, both doing it in a smaller company like B12, where we have 150 associates, and a bigger company at Epsilon, where there were 7,000 associates. In both cases, that's worked very well. And we've discovered this layer of talent that is very powerful in terms of informing strategy, but they also can take the ball and run down the field with it. and often very motivated to do it because they see it as their opportunity to sort of step up in the organization.
Yeah, and one thing that I've heard from other leaders in conversations is that right now is really an opportunity to evaluate, to look at those leaders who are stepping up, those the talent that you were focusing on, that you were developing, to really see who has stepped up, what they have done. Over these past few months. I mean, it really is, an incredible way to evaluate performance, for lack of a better word. But, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a great point. And so, about a month into the pandemic, we started doing talent calibration on a monthly basis. So, historically, we did it twice a year. But now, again, once a month, we're sort of going through and talking about talent, talking about where we have gaps as sort of our business has changed, uh, and also being opportunistic because there's a tremendous amount of talent on the market right now.
Yeah.
So particularly as we've built this new sales team, we've been able to hire talent that probably would have been hard for us to attract in a different environment. But we've been able to be opportunistic and find some people who may have been furloughed or people whose book of business is blown up because of the virus and they're now looking for a new opportunity. But and again, I never thought I would do talent calibration on a monthly basis, but it's part of our new normal, as saying goes, I guess.
But in that speed, it sounds like both with the speed and doing it, there's really opportunities out there, and I think that's the important part of that agile or fast or quick cycle stuff. You begin to find, as you just said, people that you may not have been able to get because you're constantly looking at it, and that's good strategy.
Yeah, well, Bob and I have had this conversation 100 times, but it's if you want to move your business, you got to move the people, and it's something you can still do during a pandemic.
Yeah, yeah.
So as we're looking forward, if there is, one piece of advice each of you were to give to a leader, what would you give right now?
From my standpoint, is I think you've got to lean in. I mean, it's I think we all probably had the initial reaction back in March where everybody was sort of scared, didn't know what was going to happen, and I see this in our clients. There's a cohort that are in the bunker and aren't doing anything. And then there's a cohort who are leaning in and they're, looking at their market realities. They're trying new things. They're, trying to innovate products to help, companies or consumers sort of deal with the coronavirus. And, in any crisis, there is opportunity.
Yeah. Mine is, as Andy knows in his book, go to your customer. They'll tell you they're working with you. They want to help you. And those potential customers, go to them and ask how you can help. And right there, you will find the opportunities. And you can look at that in terms of strategy, excuse me, and how do you react quickly to the marketplace. But typically, that customer can guide you right away if you're willing, as Andy said, to move fast and to make decisions and to stop things that aren't working. Make them both ways. Invest and get out of stuff. And I think the faster you can do that, the better off you're going to be. And I think speed is the name of the game.